Today's Frugal Friday video is for the Calisto. This is a pattern from Cork and Copper. I'm going to have the details as to how you can get this pattern for free linked in my description. I'm going to be doing my version a little bit differently today because I'm wanting to use a cotton woven print from the Emporium. This print is available for pre-order right now with the Emporium. I am going to have a link for how to order it in my description as well. The pattern Calisto originally calls for you to use a non-fraying substrate. So that's a cork or a vinyl. I've even seen several adorable versions of this pattern with a clear vinyl. But since I wanted to use a material that could fray, I'm going to make some changes on my version. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these prints and I'm going to put them wrong sides together and I'm going to quilt them. I interfaced both of these pieces with the SF-101 equivalent, and then I added thermalan to the back of one of them. So what I'll do to get this started is I will place both the exterior and the lining print wrong sides together, and then I'm just going to do some quilting. That'll have these two pieces attached. Since I'm doing that, I'm going to use binding with another print from Brittany. This is from one of her other pre-orders she's had available. I'm going to use this print for my binding. On the original Calisto pattern, you do not need to use any binding because you're using a material that won't fray. I'm going to point out the differences so that if you want to sew yours with a non-fraying material and not bind, I will tell you those steps as we go. You will have accents on yours, whereas I will have binding on mine. Either way you do this pattern, it's super quick, fun, and going to be great for last minute gifts or just really good for helping organizing things around your house. Since I'm using this print, I'm going to be making this as a gift for my mother-in-law, and it is going to be perfect for her to store her crochet hooks in. So these are the materials I'm using. I'm also going to be using some zipper tape. This is from Mormino. This is the deep amaranth purple. So I will use one piece of number 5 zipper tape. I haven't grabbed a pull yet. And I'm also going to be using 2 tags. This is from Heartwood and Hide, and this is from Sewing Blurbs. I'll go off camera and quilt the exterior and the lining together, and then we'll come back and actually start sewing with the pattern. I have taken this piece of my exterior, my lining, and then thermalan in between and quilted it. I just did some diagonal stitches and I kept them pretty far apart. Let's pretend that this is a piece of vinyl and you're just following the regular pattern. At that point, the first step after you cut out the material would be to take the zipper, lay it right sides down on the exterior part of your vinyl, the right side of your vinyl, and then just sew with the seam allowance down here, flip it, top stitch it. You would do then the same thing on the other side, so you could separate the zipper and do the same steps on the other side. If you were using the vinyl, you wouldn't have to bind, but the way the pattern has you do it is you add the zipper and then you add the accent strip of another piece of vinyl to the top, and it kind of creates a faux binding. But since I wanted to use this print and I did not have it in vinyl, I'm doing it this way. I cut out my strips about 1.5 inches wide. It is not cut on the bias, so it really has very little stretch to it. I don't need it to because I'm doing straight edges. So I have 2 of these pieces. The first one I'll start by just placing it right sides down, so it is right sides together with this piece of cotton woven that I have. And then I'm just going to sew down here, and I'm just going to use 1/4 inch of a seam allowance to attach my binding to this piece. I will start at the top and then I will backstitch here and then sew all the way down and backstitch when I end. I'll make sure that I keep the edges in line and so that I can get a really nice sew on this. Once I have that binding attached, I'm just going to flip it up, go to the other side, and then I'm just going to fold it so that it covers that previous row of stitching. This is the single fold method of binding. You could do a double fold. You could use waterproof canvas and do a raw edge. This is just my preferred way to do it. So what I do is I start by folding that raw edge so that it meets the raw edge of my exterior. What I'm hoping will happen is that when I fold this over, this folded edge will perfectly line up with the stitches. it matches beautifully. So that folded edge covers my row of stitches that I did at the 1/4 inch seam allowance perfectly. So now what I'll do is I'll add a clip here, and then I'm going to continue to fold and clip all down this side. I do not have to worry about the edges on this one because they will be caught in another row of binding at the end of this project. I know that my exterior and my linings are the same print, so it may be kind of hard to distinguish, but this is actually going to be the interior of my bag, and so I fold to the interior. But I'm always going to be sewing from the exterior. I'm always going to be sewing from the pretty side. That's how I attached this binding, and now that's going to be how I do this last row of stitching. So what I'll do is I'll start here at the top, and I'm going to sew just a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Since I was able to fold it over exactly the seam allowance to match those previous stitches on the other side, that folded edge matches the stitches perfectly that I already sewed. So this time whenever I use that same seam allowance, it should catch it perfectly with no issues. When you come to your clip, don't just pull it off because you could change the way it is laying on the other side. So we want to be careful. We want to only remove the clip when we're getting ready to sew over that part. We open it up and then slide it out gently. We don't pull and risk messing with the way this binding will look on the other side. This is how the binding looks on the exterior. When we flip it over on the interior, you can see it matches perfectly. I'm going to trim up these raw edges. I don't need to keep them there. And I'm going to repeat those same steps to attach the binding on the other side. Now that I have the binding on both sides, I'm going to attach this to the zipper. I purposely cut my zipper longer than I needed to so I could have plenty of wiggle room because I'm not adding the pull yet. I'm also going to be attaching my zipper differently than the pattern says because I have this binding here. Like I mentioned, for the pattern you would place it right sides together, sew it, then flip it and top stitch it. But for me, I'm just going to lay it on and sew it down this way. So mine's going to be just a little bit different. It'll still look the same in the end, just a different sewing technique. What I did first was I made some marks here at the top on both sides of the zipper tape because I'm going to separate this zipper, and this will help me to just have a little bit better of an eye whenever I'm placing the pull on to make for sure everything is even. I have the top of this exterior piece where that mark is. I'll still check it before I add the pull to make sure it looks good, but that'll just kind of help me to make sure everything stays neat and straight. If you're someone who likes to use double-sided tape, you could easily put down a row of double-sided tape and then just attach this on here to make for sure you have the neatest, straightest sew whenever you're adding the zipper. I'm just going to kind of eyeball mine and go slowly. I did take the time though to iron my zipper to make for sure it was flat so that it could lay easier and I have the best chance of getting that straight sew. When I take it over to my sewing machine, I want about a 1/4 inch between the teeth and this edge of the binding. On the binding, I'm going to be sewing just about 1/8 inch away to attach, so I'm not sewing over my previous row of stitches. I'll end up having 2 rows of stitching showing on this binding. I'll back stitch when I start and stop, and then I'm just going to go really slow because I'm going to be adjusting as I go to make sure I keep the teeth as straight as possible with this binding. This is how the first side looks. So now what I'll do is I'll separate the zipper tape. I'm just going to flip this around and do the same thing on the other side. I do not have to worry about placing the zipper tape any certain way because I do not have the pull on there. But I do want to take that mark that I made and make sure or try my best to have it at the edge of this exterior piece so that I can attach the zipper pull somewhat decently or have it the best option of getting it straight. So now I'm taking this side over to the sewing machine and I'm going to try my best to have the same amount of zipper tape showing, so about a 1/4 inch away, and again I'm going to sew about 1/8 inch on the binding edge. My print is not directional, so I don't have to worry about which way I attach the zipper pull. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip it over. So this is my exterior. I'll flip it over so I'm looking at the lining. And now what I'm going to do is match up these bottom pieces and then I'm going to put my zipper pull on. I'm going to take the zipper pull and start it here at the bottom and take it all the way to the top, and I'm going to completely take it off, and so that way the zipper is closed together, and then I will just add the pull and have it halfway up. If your print is directional, make sure that you attach your pull in a way that whenever you pull it to the top, it will be closed, and when you open it, it goes to the bottom. So once I add the pull and get the zipper closed, then I can look here at the bottom and the top and make sure it looks pretty even. Mine looks really good, so I'm okay with that. So now I will attach it to the bottom and then just zip it up halfway, and then that step is done. So now what I want to do is I want to make for sure that I have the zipper in the center. So I'm going to go off camera and make my measurements and have everything clipped up so that the zipper is actually in the true middle. I'll go ahead and trim up my zipper tape at that point as well. I have everything lined up. Everything looks great. Getting ready to sew it, and then I realized I forgot to put these tags on. Now this tag isn't going to be a problem because I'm just going to have it up here, but this one definitely needs to be added. So the way I'm going to do it is I am going to sew it here on the center on the back. So I'm going to try to get this attached by first sewing this and basting it in place, and then that way I can open it up all the way and just kind of attach it that way. Not the best way to do it. So if you're adding a tag, do it before I do it. It's all right. It'll work. So what I'm going to do first though is I'm going to have my little woven label there at the top. I'm going to have it down a little because I don't want the binding to cover any of the words. And since I have everything centered, I'm just going to baste these two top parts closed. You could sew down these sides, but I'm definitely not going to. I want it a little puffy, and plus if I sew down the sides, it'll be kind of thick and it might not look as good, and it'll reduce just a little bit though, but it will reduce the room I have inside for storage, and I don't want to do that. So let's go ahead and sew these edges closed, and that will baste them down so it'll be easier to add the binding, and it will let me add this woven label. So I'm just going to be basting 1/8 of an inch just to close everything up. So now that I have these edges basted, I can go ahead and open this up and figure out where I want to place that tag. So I definitely want it centered. So let me just put a clip where my center is. I think I'm going to place it kind of low and put it right here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll add some glue around here just so it'll secure in place and I won't have to worry about it shifting while I'm trying to sew it on. So this is where I want the tag to go. So now let's open it up. And we're gonna really have to go slow to sew around here because I do not want to catch any of the other side. And yes, doing it this way, the stitches will be shown from the inside, but this is the best choice for me at this point. I want the tag on. Back stitching here, and then I'm just going to sew around the perimeter of this tag. Not my best stitching on a tag for sure, but I'm still glad I added it. If you did the vinyl version, you would have just had the overlays here, and then across the top edge, you would just wrap around the raw edge vinyl binding and just sew across it. So the vinyl version is much quicker, but if you have woven, you can still make this pattern, and it is a super cute way to do it. So let's grab out another piece of the binding. I am making mine match just because I want that cohesiveness, but you could definitely have these be different colors. The thing what I'm doing with this one though, is this is going to be a finished edge. So I have my binding right sides together with the exterior, but I'm going to have this edge tucked so that it's a finished edge. So I'm just tucking it to the wrong sides, so wrong sides together. Match up that edge. I want it as close as possible to be matching. I really don't want any overlap there. I'm going to add a clip just so I can try to make for sure I have it matched perfectly. Take it over to the machine. I'm going to sew with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance once again. Now once I get to the edge, I'm going to have to trim the extra and fold that other end down. The reason I'm not doing it now is because I know that woven does have a tendency to stretch a little. So even though this isn't cut on the bias, it will still have just a little bit of stretch, and I want to make for sure I have a perfect finish. So now that I'm pretty close to the end, I'm going to go ahead and trim this up, leaving a little bit of overhang so that I can fold it down so that I have the edges finished. Matching it up as perfectly as I can. And now I'm going to sew over that too. We're going to do the same thing by coming to the wrong side, flipping up. And sorry, you'll hear that zipper pull clanking around. But now you're just going to fold it the same way by tucking it in. On the edges, you will do the same thing, and to have that finished edge on the edges as well. So let's just start in the middle. We have a little bit more bulk here. So on this one, I wasn't able to have this raw edge completely tucked up against there. This is the beauty of doing a single fold binding, is so I can make it a little bit of a bigger fold so that I can cover that row of stitches perfectly. The reason why it's a little trickier here is that I have a little bit more bulk because I have the 2 layers of the material with the fleece attached. So I have it clipped. You can see that I have it covering that previous row of stitching perfectly. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing that same 1/4 inch seam allowance from edge to edge. Here's how the binding on the top looks. The tag looks adorable, I think. I'm going to trim up my threads and then do the same row of stitches at the bottom, and then we will come back and look at our finished pouch. I finished my Calisto from Cork and Copper. I used fabrics from the Emporium. I used zipper tape from Mormino. I used a tag from Sewing Blurbs. I used a cork tag from Heartwood and Hide. This pouch turned out so cute. This is going to be a great gift for my mother-in-law. She will really like it. It's going to be perfect to help her store her crochet hooks, and honestly she could even store her current crochet pattern that she is working with. It is that big. Opens up nice and wide so it's easy to access and get into there on the sides. On my version, you can see the zipper tape there, the raw edge, but that is a finished edge and the binding is finished underneath, so it's not any problems. I don't have to worry about anything fraying or anything like that. My version is different than the pattern version because I did use a cotton woven and I did add binding. There is a tutorial online. It is made by Lanyos Handmade, and she does the original version with the, I think she uses cork or vinyl in hers. I'm going to have the link for hers in my description as well. So if you don't want to make yours out of the cotton woven and want to use the materials the pattern designer originally wrote this for, you will be able to see that version easily as well. This is just my interpretation, and I have to admit, I love it. I definitely think I want to make more of these patterns. I do want to make the version that she has with the raw edge material. It's just this is what I had on hand. But I think this is such a great pattern. It's a free pattern, and it's great for gifts and cute ways to keep things organized. I can see stacking several of these and just having whatever you need in there. Honestly, this size, this is a large. It comes in a small too. But honestly, this size would be perfect for even organizing like a paperwork. So this pattern is super cute, great for organizing. I love it so much. In my link, I'll have the information for how you can get the pattern for free, but I'll also have the information for how to get the fabrics. The pre-order is open now with the Emporium, but it will be closing soon, so make sure you check that out. If you have any questions about this pattern, about my materials, please let me know. Thank you so much for watching another Frugal Friday video. This series is really challenging me to be more frugal and to look for new free patterns, and then even to kind of think of different ways to use the free patterns that I've already sewed before. If you have a free pattern that you would like to see me sew up, definitely let me know. I appreciate all recommendations. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.